Every day, people walk into my shop with all sorts of things. Old toys, guitars, family heirlooms. Sometimes they bring in coins. Most of the time, they're just pocket change, worth a few bucks maybe. But every once in a while, something special comes through that door. A coin with a story so big, you can't believe it's real. That's the story of the 1930 Australian penny. It's not just a piece of copper, it's a legend. It's a symbol of luck, a piece of history, and one of the most sought-after coins in the entire world. This isn't just about a coin, it's about a treasure hunt that has lasted for almost a century. Now, you might be thinking, Rick, it's just a penny. What's the big deal? Well, in the world of collecting, sometimes the smallest items hold the biggest value. The story behind the item is everything. Before Australia had its own money, they used a mix of whatever they could get their hands on. British coins, Spanish dollars, even rum was used as currency. It was a mess. So, in 1910, Australia started making its own coins. The penny was the workhorse of the new currency. It was used for everything, from buying a loaf of bread to a newspaper. It was a coin for the people, in everyone's pocket. The penny represented a new identity for Australia. It was a sign that the country was standing on its own 2 feet. These coins featured the British monarch on one side, King George V at the time, and a simple text design on the other. Later, they added the iconic kangaroo, which everyone recognizes today. The penny was part of daily life for over 50 years. People saved them in jars, kids used them for games, and they were a constant presence. But one specific year, 1930, turned this everyday object into something extraordinary. That's where our story really begins. What makes one penny different from millions of others? It comes down to rarity, story, and a little bit of mystery. Think of it like this. You could have a million brand new baseball cards, but the one rare misprinted card from 70 years ago is the one everyone wants. The 1930 Australian penny is that card. It was never supposed to exist. It was created by accident in the middle of one of the toughest times in modern history. That combination of factors created a perfect storm for collectors. It's a piece of history you can hold in your hand, and that's what makes it priceless. Before Australia had its own pennies, things were pretty chaotic. Imagine trying to run a business when customers are paying with coins from 5 different countries. That was the reality. After Australia became a federation in 1901, the new government knew it needed its own official currency. It was a matter of national pride and practical economics. Finally, in 1911, the first Australian pennies were struck. These early coins were actually made in London and Birmingham, England, because Australia didn't have the right equipment yet. They were shipped all the way to the land down under. These first pennies featured King George V on the obverse, or the head side. The reverse, or tail side, was very simple. It just said 1 penny inside a circle, with the words Commonwealth of Australia around the edge. They were big, heavy copper coins, about the size of a US half-dollar. They were built to last. For the first time, Australians had a uniform coin they could trust. It made trade easier and helped unify the nation. This was a huge step for the young country, creating a sense of shared identity through the money people used every single day. By 1916, Australia was ready to start making its own coins. Mints were set up in Melbourne and Sydney. This was a big deal. Now, Australia could control its own money supply from start to finish. The pennies made in Australia looked almost identical to the British-made ones, but they sometimes had small mint marks to show where they were made. For years, the Melbourne Mint churned out millions of pennies. They were a constant part of Australian life. People didn't think twice about them. They were just money, used and spent without a second thought. The design of the penny stayed pretty much the same for a long time. King George V stayed on the front until his death in 1936. The simple text on the back was a familiar sight. It wasn't until 1938 that the famous kangaroo design was introduced, which became an instant classic. But before the kangaroo hopped onto the scene, something strange happened at the Melbourne Mint. An economic crisis, a communication breakdown, and a curious mint master would come together to create the most famous Australian coin of all time. Nobody knew it then, but the stage was being set for a numismatic legend. Making a coin seems simple, but it's a precise process. It all starts with two master dies. These are hardened steel stamps, one for the front of the coin and one for the back. You place a blank copper disc, called a plancher, between them. Then, a massive press slams the dies together with immense force, stamping the image onto the copper. This process is repeated millions of times to produce coins for an entire country. The Melbourne Mint was a factory of money, and in a normal year, they would produce millions of pennies to meet public demand. However, 1930 was not a normal year. The Great Depression had hit Australia hard. The economy was in a tailspin. People weren't spending money because they didn't have any. Businesses weren't ordering change because sales were down. As a result, the Australian Treasury sent a message to the Melbourne Mint: "We don't need any new pennies for 1930. The official order was to halt production. There were already enough pennies in circulation to meet the country's needs. So, officially, no pennies dated 1930 were ever supposed to be made for the public. This is where the story gets interesting. Back then, mints had a tradition. To test the new dies for the upcoming year, and to make sure everything was aligned, they would often strike a small number of proof coins. These were special, high-quality examples made for archival purposes, or for important collectors and museums. It's believed that the Melbourne Mint Master, preparing for a 1930 coin run that never came, used a 1930 reverse die and paired it with an existing King George V obverse die to strike a handful of these proof pennies. Maybe 6 of them were made. These are the proof 1930 pennies, the absolute holy grail for collectors. But that doesn't explain the other pennies that people found in their change. Here's the leading theory. To keep the mint's machinery in working order, and perhaps for a few souvenir requests from well-connected visitors, a small batch of regular circulation pennies was struck. This was done quietly, against official orders. The mint paired a 1930 reverse die with an obverse die from a previous year, likely an Indian quarter-anna die that was kept at the mint. This explains why many 1930 pennies have unique marks and a slightly different look. No one knows the exact number, but the estimate is around 1,500 coins, a tiny number that slipped out into the wild. The Great Depression was a time of incredible hardship around the world, and Australia was hit as bad as anyone. Unemployment skyrocketed. People lost their homes, their farms, and their savings. In this economic climate, money was scarce. Every penny counted, quite literally. The government's decision not to mint new pennies in 1930 made perfect sense. There was a surplus of coins already in circulation, and the demand for new currency had completely dried up. The wheels of commerce had ground to a halt, and the minting presses fell silent along with them. Those few thousand 1930 pennies that were accidentally created didn't make a splash. They were just mixed in with bags of other pennies from other years and shipped out to banks whenever a small order came in. They slipped into circulation unnoticed. Imagine a single drop of red dye in an entire swimming pool. That's what it was like. A shopkeeper in Sydney or a farmer in the outback could have received a 1930 penny in their change and not given it a second look. It was just a penny. In a time when people were worried about where their next meal was coming from, the date on a coin was the last thing on their minds. This is a key part of the coin's mystique. It hid in plain sight for years. For more than a decade, the 1930 penny was a ghost. No one was looking for it because no one knew it existed. Coin collectors at the time worked from official mint records, and those records showed that 0 pennies were produced for circulation in 1930. As far as the collecting world was concerned, a 1930 penny was an impossibility. It was a phantom coin. This period of anonymity allowed the coins to spread far and wide across the vast continent of Australia, passing through thousands of hands. The silence was finally broken in the 1940s. A few sharp-eyed collectors started noticing something odd. They would be sifting through bags of old pennies and find a coin with a date that wasn't supposed to be there. 1930. At first, people thought they were fakes or alterations, but as more and more reports trickled in, the truth started to dawn on the numismatic community. A major rarity had been hiding under their noses the whole time. The quiet release during the Depression had created a modern treasure, and now the hunt was officially on. The discovery of the 1930 penny wasn't a single eureka moment. It was more like a slow-burning fire that gradually grew into an inferno. In the mid-1940s, coin collecting was becoming a more serious hobby in Australia. Collectors started publishing lists of coins and their mintages. When they got to the penny, there was a blank space for 1930. Then, a collector named Sidney V. Hagley wrote in a numismatic journal that he had found one. The news spread like wildfire through the small community of collectors. It was like finding a living dinosaur. Everyone was skeptical at first, but soon other collectors confirmed similar finds. The chase was on. People started frantically searching through their change, their money boxes, and any old jars of coins they had lying around. Remember, this was before decimal currency was introduced in Australia in 1966. Pennies were still in everyday use. This meant that a priceless rarity could literally be sitting in your pocket. Newspapers started running stories about the king of Australian coins, and suddenly, everyone was a treasure hunter. Schoolboys, office workers, and grandparents all began checking the date on every single penny they came across. It was a nationwide obsession. This public frenzy is what saved many of the coins from being lost forever. When Australia switched to decimal currency, the old pennies were recalled by the government to be melted down. Billions of coins were destroyed. But because so many people were actively looking for the 1930 penny, a good number of them were pulled from circulation and saved from the furnace. The legend of the coin actually helped ensure its survival. It's a fantastic irony. The hype that drove its price up also protected the very supply that collectors were desperate to get their hands on. Stories from this era are legendary. A schoolboy in Melbourne reportedly found one in the 1950s and sold it to buy his first bicycle. A construction worker found one while digging a foundation and used the money to put a down payment on a house. These tales, whether completely true or slightly exaggerated, added to the coin's mythology. It wasn't just a collector's item anymore. It was a lottery ticket that could fall into anyone's hands. This democratic appeal, the idea that anyone could get lucky, is a huge part of what makes the 1930 penny so special to this day. As the fame of the 1930 penny grew, so did its price. In the 1960s, you might have been able to buy one for a few hundred Australian pounds, which honestly was still a huge amount of money for a coin. But as the supply of new finds from circulation dried up, the value started to climb dramatically. The coin became a blue-chip investment in the numismatic world. Every time one came up for auction, it seemed to set a new record. Collectors from around the globe started paying attention, and the competition to own one of the estimated 1,500 circulation coins became fierce. One of the most famous sales happened in 1996. A man named David L., a big-time collector, bought a collection that included one of the ultra-rare proof 1930 pennies. This wasn't one of the regular ones that slipped into circulation. This was one of the original 6 specimens made for archival purposes. It was in perfect, pristine condition. He sold it for 140,000 Australian dollars, a staggering amount at the time. That sale made headlines across Australia and solidified the coin's status as not just a collectible, but a serious financial asset. The market for Australian coins was never the same again. Then there's the story of the king of 1930 pennies. Of the 6 known proof pennies, one stands above the rest. It was once part of the private collection of the British Museum. Later, it was acquired by a wealthy collector in Sydney. In 2019, this specific proof penny sold for an incredible 1.15 million Australian dollars. Let that sink in. Over $1 million for a single penny. It was the first Australian coin ever to break the $1 million barrier, making it the most valuable coin in the country's history. That sale cemented its legendary status on the world stage. These headline-grabbing sales have a ripple effect. Every time a rare proof version sells for a fortune, it boosts the value and interest in the more common circulation-grade 1930 pennies. Even a heavily worn 1930 penny, one that has clearly been passed around for decades, can be worth tens of thousands of dollars. Today, in 2025, A decent quality circulation strike will easily set you back $30,000 to $50,000. And for a top quality one, you're looking at 6 figures. It's a testament to the power of rarity and story. There's no other coin in Australia that even comes close. You might be thinking, this is all very interesting for an Australian, but why should an American collector care about a penny from the other side of the world? Well, let me tell you, serious collectors don't care about borders. A rare coin is a rare coin, period. The principles of collecting are universal: rarity, condition, and historical significance. The 1930 Australian penny scores a 10 out of 10 in all 3 categories. American collectors who are used to hunting for their own rarities like the 1909 SVDB Lincoln Cent or the 1913 Liberty Head nickel recognize a superstar when they see one. The story of the 1930 penny has a lot of parallels to famous American coins. Take the 1943 copper penny. The US Mint was supposed to be making all pennies out of steel that year to save copper for the war effort. But a few copper planchets got stuck in the machinery and were accidentally struck. Those few copper pennies are now worth a fortune. The story of an accidental creation, a mistake that becomes a treasure, is something that fascinates all coin collectors. The 1930 Australian penny is one of the best examples of that story in the entire world. Moreover, the global coin market is more connected than ever. With the internet, auction houses can reach bidders from anywhere on the planet. An American collector can bid on a 1930 penny in a Sydney auction just as easily as someone living down the street. Grading services like PCGS and NGC are international, so a coin graded in Australia is trusted by a buyer in New York. This has turned the 1930 penny into a global commodity. It's an icon of the Southern Hemisphere, and owning one is a badge of honor for any serious world coin collector, no matter where they live. For American collectors looking to diversify their portfolio, the 1930 penny is a fantastic choice. It holds its value incredibly well and has a track record of steady appreciation. It's also a great conversation piece. It's a way to own a piece of history from another country, a story of economic depression, minting mystery, and a nationwide treasure hunt. It's more than just an investment. It's an artifact that tells a universal human story. And that's something any collector, American or otherwise, can appreciate. It's a world-class collectible hiding in a humble penny's clothing. Over the decades, the 1930 penny has become more than just a collector's item. It has woven itself into the fabric of Australian culture as a symbol of incredible luck. Finding one is like winning the lottery. The stories of ordinary people stumbling upon one have fueled this legend. It represents the idea that fortune can smile on you when you least expect it. This transforms the coin from a simple piece of metal into a talisman, an object believed to bring good fortune to its owner. It carries a weight far beyond its copper content. This lucky penny reputation has been amplified by the media. Every time one is sold at auction for a record price, the story is splashed across newspapers and television news. The narrative is always the same. This humble, everyday object turned out to be a life-changing treasure. This constant reinforcement has cemented its status in the public imagination. It's the ultimate underdog story. A penny, the lowest denomination of currency, becoming the king of all coins. It's a story people love to hear, and it makes them dream of their own lucky break. The legacy extends beyond just the coin itself. The phrase the 1930 penny has become shorthand in Australia for anything that is incredibly rare and valuable. You might hear someone say, finding a parking spot here is like finding a 1930 penny. It's a cultural reference point that everyone understands, even if they aren't coin collectors. This shows how deeply the story has penetrated the national consciousness. It's a piece of folklore, passed down through generations. Grandparents tell their grandchildren to always check their change, just in case. This cultural significance adds another layer of value to the coin. You're not just buying a rare piece of currency, you're buying a piece of a national legend. It's an artifact that embodies hope, luck, and the thrill of the hunt. For many owners, the coin is a source of pride and a link to a fascinating chapter in their country's history. It's a story that never gets old, and it ensures that the 1930 penny will remain a cherished and sought-after object for many, many years to come. It's a legacy that money can buy, but the story is priceless. So here we are in 2025, almost a century after this humble coin was accidentally minted. Why are we still so fascinated by it? The story of the 1930 penny has everything. It has mystery. We still don't know exactly how many were made, or the full story of their creation. It has drama, born during the Great Depression, and it has the ultimate treasure hunt narrative, a priceless object hiding in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by a lucky individual. It's a real-life adventure story that you can hold in the palm of your hand. The thrill of the chase is a powerful motivator. Even though the chances of finding a 1930 penny in an old jar of coins today are almost zero, people still look. The dream is still alive. That hope is part of the magic. For serious collectors, the chase is more strategic. It involves tracking auction appearances, networking with dealers, and saving up the substantial funds needed to acquire one. Owning a 1930 penny is the pinnacle of Australian coin collecting. It's the centerpiece that every great collection is built around. It's the ultimate prize. The coin also serves as a fantastic gateway into the hobby of numismatics. The story is so compelling that it draws people in. They might hear about the 1930 penny and then start looking at the other coins in their possession. They begin to notice the different dates, mint marks, and designs. They start to appreciate the history that each coin represents. In this way, the legend of the 1930 penny helps keep the entire hobby of coin collecting alive and well, inspiring a new generation of collectors to look closer at the small pieces of history they encounter every day. Ultimately, the 1930 Australian penny is a reminder that extraordinary value can be found in the most ordinary of places. It teaches us that history is not just something in dusty books. It's in the objects we touch and use. It's a story of chance, history, and incredible fortune. And that's why, whenever a coin comes into my shop, I still get that little jolt of excitement. Because you never know. It might just be pocket change, but it could be the next 1930 penny. And that's a story that will never lose its value.